Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I'd like to talk about an article I came across from the University of Copenhagen in May by Sadie Harley and Robert Egan, and it had to do with artificial intelligence and radicalization. And I thought, who better to talk to about that than Regina Phelps? Regina, welcome back.
Alex, I don't know if that was a good thing that you said about me or a bad thing, but yes, thank you. It's nice to be back with you.
It was a good thing because you and I have talked about myths and disinformation, and AI in this article is one of the tools that's doing that. So I thought,
Absolutely.
well, let's have a chat because it's taking our conversation a step further.
Absolutely. And when you think about this particular topic, it actually, and you think about who's actually doing all the mis and disinformation, it's actually even as small as you and I, as we've talked about many times, sharing things without validating that they're right, all the way up to really highly advanced groups on the far right, the far left, and jihadists that are actually doing this. So it's a big bandwidth, if you will, of people that are actually part of this.
Well, one of the other things this article mentioned is part of the problem is we're now creating AI that can create its own content, generative AI, which is now contributing even more.
Yes, yes. I think that generative AI is really frightening in many ways. And, I'm sure you probably have heard of people that actually developed a relationship with their bot, who over time became like a confidant. Even people that have had girlfriends and boyfriends that are actually bots. But there's also been cases of people that have committed suicide with instructions given to them by their bot. And there's some concern, not in probably the more refined bots like a Chat GPT or a Claude or somebody like that, although perhaps, but in some of the other more less obvious bot systems where people will actually get radicalized because the bot will over time really groom them, if you will, into actually pursuing a more radical life. That's pretty frightening.
Yeah. Do you think these social media sites and AI platforms, I know you mentioned a few, but there are many, many others. Do
Right.
you think they have a moral obligation to put some guardrails on to identify when some of these things are occurring?
I personally do. And I think the other thing I would say is that it should be very clear when you think about information. So one way is interacting with AI directly through a bot. But then think about when you go into another platform, whether it's a LinkedIn or it's a TikTok or whatever, and you're starting to see information that has been generated by AI, but there's no labeling on it. It doesn't say it's AI generated. And I think there's a couple things that would be very helpful in the area of AI safety in general, which is one is that we look at the algorithms that companies have that actually get you to continue again to pursue down that pathway. And that's all driven by algorithms. They're watching what you're doing, the questions you're asking, and then they just sort of lead you down this path. And the second really is the issue related to labeling. If you're on another site now, and you're on another site, maybe it's a Facebook or an Instagram or whatever, labeling AI content would be really important. So you could then see it wasn't a person that had actually created this content and material, but you're actually engaging with something that was done by artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I see that a lot on Facebook. So that's why I'm not on there uh, very much at all now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I
there's
think
so
it's
much big content coming out. And
right.
you and I, hopefully we're both uh, experienced enough to recognize what's real and what's not and look for the signs. But there are so many people who don't know
Right, right. And I think
that.
part of that, as we've talked about many times before, is that the idea of actually people actually putting up their, take off the blinders and put up their kind of antenna when they start to see things. And the whole issue about information, and in particular, the whole clickbait idea, where, oh my gosh, that's such a sensational story, could be easily AI generated. And it makes you want to immediately share it or engage with that information in a way that continues to send you down the rabbit hole. Anything that has that kind of visceral feel, I think, is something that people need to be highly suspicious of. And that's something that just takes some self-discipline to actually stop, think about it. Do I need to double check this with other sources? Because just because it's on AI does not mean it's right.
Yeah. And then there's to jump on something you said there, the sensational headlines that get generated. And then you read the article or whatever, the picture that goes with it, and it's barely relatable to the headline, but the algorithm captures that headline and thinks that's what you're interested in. And there you go, as you said earlier, down the rabbit hole.
Right, right. They catch you with the headline, and then the first few, maybe the first paragraph or two might be something that's like, okay, well, this sort of, and then it sort of changes. And interestingly enough, when I was doing research over the weekend for this particular conversation that we're having today, I went to a site and it's called International Center for Counterterrorism. Now, think about what that title sounds like. Sounds like it would actually be something that you would go to for logical information. And so I got an article from them, and essentially it was all talking about artificial intelligence. And the first paragraph was kind of weird. And the second paragraph was basically, it was a far right group in the United States that had written it. And it was talking about how great it was that Trump had actually pardoned all of the Jan 6 rioters, and that that was the way to, I mean, it was just like, whoa. So just because you see something at a site that looks like it might be correct or at least balanced, I think you need to be careful always when looking at anything before you actually invest much time or energy, and certainly have it sway your view of an opinion on something.
Well, what are some of the things someone could do? I know you started to touch on a couple of them, but if you were to provide advice to somebody, say, if you want to find out if something is real or not, or you want to get a comfort feeling that what you're reading is true, what are some of the things that people should pay attention to?
Yeah, I think that's super important for all of us because it's so easy for us to get distracted and dive into something and realize, oh my gosh, I'm down the rabbit hole. The first one really is having a broader news diet. And so this takes, again, it's a little discipline on our part, but again, if you're looking at primarily where you get your news information, and currently right now, I actually looked up the stat today, 43% of everybody over 30 gets all of their news from social media. So that means, again, whatever channel you're in, 43% is a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, I mean, so not a news broadcast, not a newspaper, not a news site or something like that. It is social media. So Facebook, TikTok, etc. So if that's where you're getting all of your information straight away, you need to actually have some other sources that you need to validate from. So the first one is, can you diversify your media ecosystem so that you're getting more information from a broader source? If you don't choose to do that, then I would really encourage you to think about if you see something, and especially if it's kind of sensationalized in the clickbait kind of mode, I would say before you start sharing that, before you start talking with your buds, go into a couple of news sites and just, put in a few sentences on a search and see what you get. So I think that would be really important. The second is really looking at the credibility of sources. And again, if 44% get their news from TikTok, as an example, who are they getting it from? I mean, what is the source of where that information is coming from? Is it an influencer who basically takes news from someplace else, digests it, and then puts it out to you? If that's the case, then I think you need to really look and see some basic news story sources. So what I always tell people is to look at things like the AP, look at things like Reuters, look at major newspapers. In Canada, what would be some of the sources you might be thinking about when you're thinking about kind of standard news? I mean, the Globe and Mail, I'm guessing, and what else?
But Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, any of the other papers, in Edmonton or Calgary. I look at CBC and CTV, you know, uh, immediately. I don't look if I see something and I'm like, huh, really? I was
Yeah,
looking
right.
at one of the other ones somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important that everybody develop, a digest, if you will, of 5 or 6 sources that they could go to in a variety of different things, so that at least you're not going off in a different direction. Um, I think the other thing you want to look at is not only the credibility of sources, the diverse number, but also really that you want to make sure that you are not being influenced by people such as influencers that are have no particular expertise in a topic.
Oh, you mean
So
those journalists?
yeah, those people, because those journalists are basically taking information from many sources, throwing it all together. And I see that in particular, the kind that makes me crazy with health information, in particular, things like vaccines, contagious diseases. I mean, look at the measles outbreaks in Canada, look at the ones we've had in the United States. A lot of that driven by influencers who are sharing what they believe is valid medical information to some naive person who then takes that information and then does whatever they do with it as far as how they make decisions. So it needs to be from a credible source. And I was actually looking at a social media post that somebody had sent me, and it was from an influencer here in the United States who was posting the most ridiculous information about measles vaccines. And they had not even gone to college, they had no medical background, and yet they had read a bunch of things and they had decided that they were now an expert and were professing this knowledge to all of their followers. And that was just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's horrifying. It
Yes.
just makes me
Agreed.
crazy.
I want to take that's looking at the individual. What I'd like to take a step back. What if we recognize someone who's going down that rabbit hole? What can we do ourselves to help that person stop going down that rabbit hole?
That's a great question. So I think what I would do is if it was a good friend of mine who all of a sudden was off on this, like say, I'll just use measles as an example, I would sit them down and say, let's just have a conversation. So let me show me where you're getting your information. And I would first of all invite them to invite me into their world, right? Of what they're seeing and what they're doing. And I say, okay, great. Well, that's really interesting. Well, let me just show you where I'm getting my information. And I would actually have a kind of a I'll use the word dueling, but I wouldn't really use that word at that time. The idea is showing, well, you're hearing this, but I'm hearing this, and this is backed up by this kind of information and this kind of research. And so I would just do my best to educate them and talk about that kind of thing. So looking at credible resources, looking at how they can actually uh, diversify their news diet, if you will, about particular topics. The idea is to expose them to other things. And then the other thing is that when you look at influencers in particular, they're often making a lot of money
Hmm.
selling whatever they're selling. And so the idea is, I think then is to really look at what's the credibility of that influencer and how much money are they making? And they're actually encouraging and you're getting, essentially feeding them, if you will, by checking in on their sites because all of the advertisement they have, blah, 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 blah. So I would really educate them. I would befriend them. I would encourage them to sort of look at what I was looking at. I would encourage them to look at what they're looking at and really understanding then the credentials behind them. And I would really talk through it as logically as I could in that regard.
Yeah, that's always good because I've recognized a few people that tend to come forward with all this information. Oh, I saw this and I saw that, and I and a few others just, what the? Where'd you get that?
Right.
Can you show us?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
when we do show, it's like, well, that's Fox News. No wonder it's wrong. No,
Right.
no,
Well,
pick up blogs. Don't send me emails. No, I'll just hit delete. But as an example, it was the first name that came to my head. That's sorry, but look at the person who's saying that, and
right,
and you described, they're making money on clicks.
right,
They couldn't care less what they're saying.
totally. And I think it's important that we don't demonize the people that are having these beliefs because they've been gone down the rabbit hole in a social media post. And I think we need to just find ways to befriend them, educate them, share information, and say, boy, if you hear something that's like that, why don't you reach out to me? I'd be happy to help you do some other searches. I mean, the idea is to try and really not turn them into an evil person because I think that's what there's a tendency to do. We
Yeah,
are all in this together, and sometimes people are really heavily influenced and we need to help them see a different way.
yeah, I agree. I know someone who has PTSD. They're retired, but he was looking at some of these social media sites and influencers saying, "Hey, this and this and this," and we would say, "Well, I don't think that's correct. We would never." we weren't yelling at him or calling him bad names, nothing. We would just suggest, hey, take a look at such and such site. I'm not sure if that's correct.
Mhm.
And we would all always, myself and my other friend, would say different sites. We'd never say the same one so that the person had options to look at. And
Yep,
now
yep,
he's actually goes, wow, he goes, what did he say last week? He worded it in a way that basically said, I didn't know I was going down a rabbit hole. He goes, it's amazing how you can fall into that and not even know you're there.
yep. That's so important. So you did a great service for your friend.
Yeah, yeah, and he's a really nice guy too. So I never want to see him get dragged into some of that crap.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah,
any
people
final
just need to
thoughts to
stay
share?
alert.
Sorry.
I think I would just say that people need to stay alert and be aware. And if something feels, weird or different, or why am I here? Check it out. Don't just keep blindly going forward. It's so easy to do.
Yeah. On that note, we've come to the end of the show. Regina, thank you so much for sharing your time and thoughts with us today.
Alex, as always, it's great to be with you.